Oh boy. Okay, you good to go?
Yeah, should be okay.
All right. Welcome back to Two Who's Review. I'm Alex,
I'm Fitz.
and today we're checking out the newest episode of Doctor Who, Rogue. This one was written by Kate Herron and Bryony Redman. And interesting statistic: it's the first episode of the show since Haunting of Villa Diodati to not, at least in part, be written by a past or present showrunner.
Interesting. And they're both
Yeah,
historical episodes set very
yeah,
closely in terms of time period. I think Haunting of Via Diodati, if I'm getting my Frankenstein history right, I think that would have been set like 5 years after this,
3 years
which
after
is
this.
3 years.
Yeah, it's an
Wow.
interesting correlation there. Yeah.
God, that's funny.
Yeah, but we're in Regency era Britain, dealing with some shapeshifters. Not for the first time since RTD took the helm again. Of
Hmm.
course, the not things in Wild Blue Yonder were they were also shapeshifters, but that's basically where the similarities end when you compare them to the Cholda, because they're very different
Yeah, yeah.
in both practice and tone.
Yeah. I think
Um,
it's pretty safe to say that the shapeshifters in Wild Blue Yonder are a lot more terrifying than the shoulder, but
yeah.
yeah.
And of course, this episode introduces us to potentially a new recurring character in the
Yeah.
form of Rogue, played by Jonathan Groff,
Hmm.
as a. In this episode, is played as a flirtatious encounter,
Hmm.
potential love interest down the line
Hmm.
to the Doctor, which it's interesting watching that and like you watch this dynamic play out, and then by the end of it, you're like, "Hoo, boy, conservatives are not gonna like this one."
Yeah. Oh, man, yeah,
But the
that's gonna
question
be
is, yeah, look, the question we have to ask is, putting that aside, is this episode good? Like, if you obviously ignore the people who say, why are they shoving gay down my throat, therefore
hmm,
episode bad, does this episode stand on its own? I think it does. I think this is a good episode. I don't think it's my favorite of the season for one reason or another. It's probably on the weaker side of episodes this season so far. But if this is the weak point of the season, then it's a good season.
yeah, that's essentially my thoughts exactly. Are there flaws with this story? Sure. And they seem small. We'll obviously get into them, and when I talk about them, I may seem to be nitpicking, but they are bigger than they seem, I think. But one, this story is still really good. Two,
Yeah.
I actually enjoyed it more on a second watch than a first watch. And three, as you say, if this is, the weakest of the season, by gum, we've had, and hopefully we'll have just a knockout season
Mm.
for this new Doctor.
Yeah,
Um,
completely.
yeah.
There are obviously some major curveballs that this episode takes with potential canon stuff regarding the Doctor's past. We'll get to that in a moment. For now, let's settle in on what is front and center in this story, which is this is the Bridgerton episode. This is the one that marketing absolutely loved to push in trailers and promos up until this episode's release. I think that's probably for the best. This is the one that, out of a lot of the episodes so far this season, is sort of presents itself the most as kind of a standard-ish Doctor Who story. You're not going to release any footage from 73 Yards as part of your promotion for this story, for example. So, I can understand why they did that. I like the historical context surrounding this episode. It leads to a lot of really interesting encounters with our characters interacting with the people from the past, from 200 years ago, some odd. I Apart from one or two areas, I don't think this episode is. It doesn't really explore its setting all too much. That's obviously because a lot of the focus of this episode is surrounding the relationship between Doctor and Rogue.
Mm.
but like it's potentially something I would have liked to have seen a bit more of, because from my understanding, I don't think we've had a Regency era Jane Austen style Doctor Who kind of story in the past, and we don't really get to do much with it here.
Mm. I mean,
Like
it's cool that they.
it's not a massive flaw. Again, like the stuff that the episode chooses to focus on, I think is good. But you know, it's just interesting that we didn't we land in Regency era England for the first time, potentially in the whole revival. I can't remember off the top of my head right now,
Mm.
and a lot of it is kind of shoved into the background for other stuff. Again, not a bad thing. It's just interesting.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and that I think, to be fair, is a part of um Doctor Who tradition. I think
Hmm.
there's always that tension between the sci-fi and the history that's been there from the beginning. But when you put them both together, there's always I think always a question of, oh, are they going to deal with the historical context as like a major part, or are they going to, and if not sidestep it, then maybe just not emphasize it as much,
Yeah.
in lieu of, wacky sci-fi antics. And I think this is a bit more the latter, but it doesn't really. I don't think it's a huge detriment.
No.
And this story, it's doing actually quite a lot. I have to say, and one thing that I really did enjoy about it, flawed. Um, in my view, a classic example of the risk taking that I've always enjoyed in Doctor Who. They're doing some pretty wacky stuff.
Yeah.
Not all of it succeeding, but the novelty of all the risks they're taking are fun in of themselves. And even when you put it all together, it's actually pretty good. The sum is definitely greater than the whole, as it often is in a lot of Doctor Who stories, but the elements of that sum are still quite entertaining. So, yeah.
I mean, we do get a few classic scenes which I would expect to
Mm,
see in this story, where
mm,
you have a male character talking down to Ruby, addressing her like someone of that time would, and you get her 21st
mm,
century sass biting back, and it's very fun to watch.
mm.
I'm glad we did get that scene. I'm glad that we didn't get I'm glad that that wasn't the point of this story. That we because for the most part, the social commentary has been pretty good this season. So if we'd gotten you know a anything that delved into that a bit too much, I think it probably would have been detrimental. So I'm glad we didn't. I'm glad we addressed it and had Ruby stand up not just for herself but also for who she thought was an innocent bystander at the time. On top of that, like as someone who doesn't watch Bridgerton, I did find the Bridgerton references a bit excessive at certain points.
I I don't think I picked up on those, but that's also because I don't watch Bridgerton. I've never
Well,
watched it.
it's mainly like the third or fourth time Ruby says this is like Bridgerton. I'm kind of like, yes, we get it.
Yeah.
We understand. Just move on, please.
Here's the thing. I There are other moments like that in this story, but and they're more subtle than that, but I found them more a little bit more annoying than, Ruby saying, "Oh my god, it's Bridgerton." Don't get me wrong, that's not great, but I think I just excused it because it's like, oh, that feels very on brand for Ruby at this point. It's just
Mm,
a way to help with characterization and to also sort of encapsulate the kind of wonder she has at exploring the universe. That being said, yeah, it's not amazing that they sort of keep hammering that home. But thankfully, the story doesn't succumb to its influences, right? Like it's not. This still feels like Doctor Who, right? This
yeah,
isn't just wacky, timey-wimey stuff with Bridgerton. There's, I think, a bit more substance, which is really good. Um, and in terms of sort of taking or borrowing from other genres and established uh, pieces of fiction, Doctor Who's done that before. Everything from the Hammer horror films with the sort of horror generated episodes that you see in the classic series. even I'll tell you what it actually kind of reminded me of. Bad Wolf a little bit, because you had that episode which was very blatantly drawing on all these, at the time, like
Current.
very, yeah, like very contemporary TV shows. Like given how, of the 2000s that episode kind of seems, I'm surprised it's aged as well as it has. But
Mm.
the point is, this sort of thing's been done before, and it's not as if it's always been done in a super subtle way. But yeah, it can. The whole "get it, guys, it's Bridgerton" can get a little bit frustrating.
Yeah. We see the Doctor and Ruby blending in. Um, and Ruby has a pair of psychic earrings, which
Mm,
help her dance without having to learn the melody, and later on helps her in a fight scene.
mm,
I think this is a cool piece of tech, but it will, and this is a very common thing with Doctor Who. So I'm not going to act like this is specifically a rogue issue, but it will beg the question: like, this technology is extremely useful. Why won't we ever see it again?
hmm. Well, who knows? Maybe we will. Although,
I can almost guarantee we're never seeing the psychic earrings again. Just it's like I said, it's a very Doctor Who thing to do for an episode, for one episode thing, being like, here's some technology, and it's presented. It's really cool in its presentation, but it's also like very very helpful to the heroes. I wonder when they're gonna. Oh no, nope. Okay, this is gone forever.
I guess so. I mean,
Like I said, like their use in this story is really good, and it's a like especially when they bring it back at the end to like to explain the Ruby twist at the end, which is
mm,
quite nice. Um,
mm,
and again, it's not to this episode's detriment. And if we're going to start marking down Doctor Who stories for introducing technology for that episode and that episode only, we'll be here all day.
yeah. So just to be clear, you don't think there's any chance it's going to be like a psychic paper sort of a deal, where it's going to show up
I,
every.
I, it might happen, but I'll be surprised if it does. Let's put it that way. My my read on it is they're things that Ruby's wearing because it's this time period. Because I don't think Ruby wears earrings in any other story. Like this is just an
Mm,
affectation for this episode.
yeah.
So I mean, again, maybe it will, but my hunch is that it won't.
Hmm, yeah. I mean, yeah, that's fair enough.
And we're also introduced to our main selling point for the story, the character of Rogue.
Mm,
And it's a really clever way he's introduced, where it's like the Doctor picks up on some alien tech, sees Rogue. We based on everything we know about this world and based on a lot of the promos, we immediately assume that he's also a bad guy. Um, because that's just the way this normally works. You've got the shoulder, and he's probably their boss. Um, and again, they play it pretty well. Like up until that moment where both the Doctor and Rogue say, essentially, "You're the bad guy here."
mm,
The audience we're all pretty much like, "Oh, okay, so the Doctor's found this dead body, and now Rogue is about to reveal that he's evil as well." But that's not the case. That's not what we get, and it's actually a really nice subversion.
mm. Yeah. Um, yeah, I think it works pretty well. Um, I really like the bit where the Doctor and Rogue first meet. I appreciate the dialogue and the performances. The fact that it,
Yeah,
uh, even the tone, the fact that it goes from kind of funny and flirty to actually kind of serious to there's a little bit of darkness there too. And the fact that it very seamlessly switches from all these emotional states very quickly is a testament to the writing and also the performances. Um, there's it's tense, like there's tension, but it's working on a number of layers. There's romantic tension, obviously, but um there's actual sort of a more of a dramatic tension going on, which is kind of great. Um, one thing I want to bring up with this scene, I was wondering when I was going to do this. Did you pay particular attention to the music in this episode?
I didn't notice this musical sting, but I did notice the second one. Um, we get a Regency orchestral version of Billie Eilish's Bad Guy, and then later on we also get the same thing with Poker Face as Ruby is fighting the children, pretending to, and like the thing being like she's going to defeat the Cholda and then put on a poker face to try and blend in with Thingo. And with the
Yeah, I
bad
know.
guy scene, it's like the Doctor and Rogue each assuming the other's a bad guy. That is
Yeah.
apparently a very Bridgerton thing to do, which is to play
Okay,
contemporary
that's
music
yeah.
in a
Okay, that
Regency
explains a
style.
lot. That
Yeah,
explains.
I liked like I said, I didn't notice the bad guy. I noticed Poker Face, and I thought it was really I enjoyed the cover, I guess.
Hmm.
But like thinking, like I did after the episode ended, I did have a think and go, oh, I bet Fitz isn't gonna like that.
Um. Yes and no. Poker Face I was actually fairly fine with it. I mean, maybe it might have been better if they used a different song. If it was just like a purely original, Murray Gold classic. Um. It's just something kind of tense and with a fast tempo or something that might have been fun. But as it wasn't too bad. It was kind of funny. And it worked. And here's the reason why that one worked and why I think Bad Guy didn't. When the song Poker Face plays, there's no indication from what I remember that it's being played diegetically, which is to say it's not being played like in the world. The orchestra isn't. There's no indication that the orchestra is playing it.
Hmm.
For all we know, this could almost be just the soundtrack that Ruby hears in her head. The
Yes,
fact that it's so nebulous actually kind of works, and it helps to sort of sell um, Ruby's perspective, which is very important in that moment. So that's actually kind of okay. I wasn't okay with Bad Guy. I actually didn't notice Bad Guy the first time. It was only the second time watching it. I'm like, oh yeah, get it, cause he's a rogue. He's the bad guy. Duh. And that annoyed me a little bit because um, I I don't know. I don't think there's any visual direct indication that that music's been played but diegetically, but the way the sound is layered into the soundtrack, it sounds like it's being played by the musicians in the period, and that kind of anachronism. I know it's a bit of a nitpick, but it does annoy me. And
I I don't think it is diegetic. Even if it look, it sounds like it's being played by the orchestra because it's being orchestrated in the Regency style, right?
yeah, I guess I just maybe because it's in the ballroom, and I assume that they have would have
Maybe.
an orchestra there playing music, but I just didn't get like given the risk that they're taking by putting both two pop songs in a classical style in this historical story. um I was surprised how well they pulled it off with Poker Face, but it just didn't quite get there for me with Bad Guy. It was funny, it was fun, and if it's if that's a Bridgerton trope, then that would make sense. But it just didn't quite get there for me. And I get that Doctor Who can be very silly at times. Fair enough. Um, that as you say, is presumably used in Bridgerton quite a lot. I don't know if that translates quite as well in Doctor Who. So yeah, that stuck out for
It's
me.
also surprising that they did this here, but they didn't do it in the Beatles episode. Like they're very willing to. I'm not sure how paying for music license works if you're remixing it like this. Presumably, you do have to like acknowledge it in some way. Um, it's just interesting that they didn't choose to do it for Devil's Chord.
Well, the only thing I know about Devil's Court. I'm pretty sure I read this in an interview where RTD said that the whole premise of the episode was based around the fact that they couldn't get
Yeah,
a license to the music. It's like,
yeah,
oh, what if we could listen to music? So, um, I mean, I'm not a copyright lawyer, so I don't know how that would all work. But I imagine maybe it would just have been a bit stricter, or maybe if they
maybe,
were
yeah.
going to have a Beatles song, I thought, well, we would at least have to actually have the song in there. So anyway, it is, as you say, though, it is strange to see it crop up here. As I say, it's one of those risks that I'm glad they took it because at least it shows that they, really care about this story and they're not afraid to do their own thing. I'm just not sure if it always works as cohesively as it could.
Um, I think it's probably a good time to start talking about Rogue in a bit more detail.
Yeah, sure.
So he is a bounty hunter, which, as in my understanding, is new for the revival. I don't think we've ever had. I don't think we've ever seen like a bounty hunter character rock up in the show.
What was the name of the dog guy from Jodie Whittaker's era? He wasn't a
What?
bounty hunter, was he?
If are you talking about Carvanista?
Yeah, I think so.
Let's check. I mean, it's he. No, not not a bounty hunter. Works for Division. While the Doctor did, but is now an officer for the Lupari.
Right.
Yeah. So no, not a bounty hunter.
Which is weird because you'd somehow think that we would have come across a bounty hunter at this point. And if I'm honest, I'm probably wrong, but I can't remember any specific instance where there was a bounty hunter in the classic series either. I might, God, eventually have to eat my words there, but yeah,
Yeah.
because
Well,
that
it's
like space bounty hunter, that just seems like a thing you'd see
yeah.
in Doctor Who.
Well, it's not really a time travel sci-fi trope, is it? It's way more of like a you associate it way more with Star Wars than anything else. Like Boba
no,
Fett is the classic.
I think. Hope I'm getting this right because we did review this story. I'm pretty sure there were two characters in Revelation of the Daleks who were bounty hunters. Yeah, because they'd been sent to kill Davros. You'll know the two I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm more referring to at least in a major role capacity. This is the biggest.
Yeah, and this is bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah. At the very least, it's just surprising that it hasn't cropped up more often, I guess.
I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
This so as interesting as this character is, as good a chemistry as Groff has with Gardwa, and for the journey that Rogue goes on in this story, I feel like we don't know all too much about him.
You wonder whether that's deliberate, and if so, how much? Because it could just be one of the, classic RTD breadcrumb trails. There's
It could be
enough of an indication that this character's going to come back, so maybe the assumption is, oh well, we can find out about his backstory later.
Yeah, because like he hints at it, like during the scene in the TARDIS, he basically tells us what happened as vaguely as he possibly can.
Yeah, but still make it fairly clear, I guess.
Well, it's clear, and it's also evident the impact that it had on the character, which is why I think it works, even though we don't learn that much. Because even putting that one scene aside, the impact that it had on his life is very, very clear in how work driven and laser focused he is regarding his entire attitude.
Yeah,
like it's evident the Doctor is way more whimsical than Rogue ever could be, or at least as depicted in this story. Perhaps he was more whimsical in the past.
Yeah. It is quite entertaining though to see the Doctor sort of draw out the whimsy a little bit at certain points.
A bit, yeah.
That kind of goes back to the chemistry that they have, which is really kind of great.
Yeah.
And I'll say this: the whole, we don't get a lot of detail in the backstory. Certainly for me, it doesn't bother me that much because I think it's tragic backstory. That's the sort of thing we've seen in Doctor Who a lot, not least of all with the Doctor themselves. So, I think, and I'm not. You correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not sure if you're saying that this is a definite criticism, but whether or not it is, I think it works well enough for what they're doing with this story. I felt when I was certainly watching that scene in the TARDIS with Rogue and the Doctor, I felt okay. Yeah, I've got enough info here. I can see what's going on.
I think
satisfied with it.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to wait and see. I think that if we never
Mm.
see Rogue again, I do think it will be a missed opportunity because it's such an inherently interesting character, and if it's only a one appearance thing, then I do feel like it was kind of wasted.
Yeah.
But if this is a and the comparison isn't lost on me here, Captain Jack Harkness style recurring character, then I do think it's deliberately vague to tantalize us for future appearances, which is why I'm kind of on the fence about it right now.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that
Um,
makes sense.
yeah. A lot of the interaction between the two characters in the first half of the episode is sort of like a and I liken it to sort of a check out my cool shit kind of battle
Yeah. Yeah.
between the two. Where the Doctor's trying to convince Rogue that he's not a Cholda.
Mm.
Rogue's sure of himself. He's showing off all his tech. The Doctor's showing off all of his tech. Sometimes Rogue has the upper hand. Sometimes the Doctor has the upper hand. Great use of the sonic screwdriver.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that worked pretty well.
Like that entire scene on Rogue's ship, even though like, and we eventually get there with the Doctor like basically like objectively saying, "I'm a Time Lord. I'm a shape changer, but I'm not a Cholda." We get there eventually, and you do feel like the Doctor could have come out with that a bit earlier, but he's having fun.
Yeah.
He's just having fun with someone who interests him, and here's why I really like the dynamic between the two in this story. It's because the way that they're presented to us, they are so similar. Like they share heaps of like commonalities, and the ways that where they differ are like really deep personalities based stuff. Like the Doctor finding another time traveler who bounces around stopping aliens and for the most part does it by themselves. Like of course he's going to find a kinship there, and there's obviously a level of physical attraction that comes along with it, but on a deeper level, the fact that he relates to Rogue so personally, and it also helps that Rogue is, I don't think it's outright confirmed, but a lot of the language he used suggests he's not human. I think that also goes a long way to me, like, buying this romance more than other potential Doctor romances in the past.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
I mentioned Captain Jack. It's also really, really easy to make a parallel between the dynamic between the Doctor and Rogue in this, and the dynamic between the Doctor and Madame de Pompadour in Girl in the Fireplace. Obviously, it's not identical, but it like there's similar time periods, and also it's a Doctor like coming into someone's life and whisking them away and sweeping them off their feet and showing them a whole new way of living and whatever it is. Like, it's similar, and I don't think that this relationship falls into the same traps as Madame de Pompadour's one does, where obviously that dynamic can be kind of icky at times, especially if you wholly consider it a romantic thing, which again I don't think is the case. But here, I don't think the same applies. I actually
I'd agree.
really buy this blossoming dynamic we have here.
Would you say in some senses, would you say it's similar to the Doctor River Song dynamic, or do you think that's a bit of a different thing?
No, I think. Look, that's the other easy comparison to make with this, and there have been a lot of people saying
because you think like, oh, Rogue, sort of world weary time traveler, very this guy's been around the block, like River has. Maybe there's similarities there, but
yeah. And look, while we're on River, I have seen some people online being like, Doctor, aren't you still married to River? Why are you flirting with this other dude? And it's like,
I'm not.
well, also like River's dead for one thing, and for another, like the way that the dynamic is like a lot of the hints that were given in River's last appearance, in the Husband of River song with Peter Capaldi, indicates that there is no place left on the Doctor's timeline moving forward where River can make an appearance and it makes sense. Like in Husbands of River song, River is convinced that Peter Capaldi isn't the Doctor because she's certain that the Doctor has run out of faces, essentially.
Yeah.
And then the first time we meet River in Forest of the Dead, River directly mentions the last time that she saw the Doctor before this, which is the Husbands of River Song. So, like, it's a closed loop, essentially. It's
Yeah.
entirely possible River shows up again and gets her memory wiped so she forgets the encounter. But in terms of, like, especially from the Doctor's vantage point, he's never seeing her again.
Yeah.
And he's waited long enough, I think. And, like, it's not. It's the whole thing with, like, how long do you wait after a spouse dies before you move on? And
Yeah.
I feel like 3 regenerations, that's enough.
Yeah. 3 generations, and, you know, half the universe disappearing. Yeah, I think, yeah, I think that's enough time and
Yeah,
space, so to speak.
yeah, and even regarding the whole and look, we're getting into the arguments from the darker side of the fan base now, but we're getting into the whole the Doctor not having shown any uh, romantic or sexual attraction towards male presenting characters in the past. A, it's subject to change with the regeneration. B, both the 13th and 14th Doctors presented bisexual personality traits from time to time. And also, way before this point, Time Lord gender and sexuality has been described to be way more fluid than like anything that we can relate to, which makes a lot of
Yeah,
sense when you are a species that can just randomly change gender.
yeah,
I have a feeling that
yeah,
for
for
a lot
sure.
of Time Lords, I have a feeling for a lot of Time Lords, there is no like, and this may be like, maybe perhaps an oversimplification, but I get the distinct impression that most Time Lords would probably just be like, I think the term is omnisexual, where it's like I'm attracted to who I'm attracted to, and gender doesn't play into it whatsoever because it can't.
Mm.
Like that just makes too much sense to me. And maybe this Doctor skews more one direction than other Doctors have. That's not a plot hole. That's Time Lord science.
Yeah, there's nothing in terms of plot or even theme, I think, really, to say that
Mm,
this couldn't possibly happen. No, it's
yeah, and I've also
quite a
seen a lot of
ridiculous
people.
argument.
I've also seen a lot of people say the Doctor has never like exhibited um like sexuality has never been a factor in the personification of the Doctor in the past. That's an argument,
Yeah,
and I'm
and
like, mate, he's got a granddaughter.
yeah,
That's the Doctor's sexuality on display. Anytime he
and look,
kisses someone, that's their sexuality on display. Anytime he mentions that someone is attractive, that's their sexuality on display. It's just that this time their sexuality happens to be male male, and people have picked up on that and are complaining about it. That's all it is.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, and I even in the past, during the RTD, certainly with the Moffat era, you know, Doctor Companion romances have
Mm,
bothered me, and I think they've even bothered you for
yes,
varying reasons. Um,
completely.
but I think it works here,
It does.
completely. There's
Well, for
nothing.
one,
Sorry, no, go ahead.
well, we can be reasonably confident that Rogue isn't thousands and thousands of years old, so
Mm,
that might be a hurdle to reach. But
mm.
Rogue has definitely reached like maturity, like
Yeah.
able to make their own decisions. But also, there's no power imbalance here, which is
Yes.
something that they never brought
Yeah.
up in the Rose era. But
Mm.
that's another big factor I have whenever like they try and present the Doctor and Rose in a romantic light, and I'm like, ew,
Yeah.
icky. It's
Yeah.
not just a 1,000-year age gap. It's the fact that the Doctor is clearly in a position of authority and power over
Yeah.
Rose,
For sure.
and exploring a romantic relationship with someone with that dynamic is always
Yes.
just kind of
Yeah.
to me.
Yeah. For sure.
This isn't the case with Rogue. It's
Yeah.
way more of a mutual equals kind of thing.
Yeah. I think the phrase that sort of cropped up in my mind a couple of times is that the playing field is more
Yeah.
equal, so to speak.
Yes.
So that's why one of the reasons why the romance works.
Yeah.
Um, and given given a gay, it's done really well. I really felt that strong connection between Rogue and the Doctor. And there's I suppose maybe it's suitable for the time period, but there's that sort of
Hmm.
very romantic tragedy to it as
Yeah.
well. I love the moment at the end where the Doctor he's just got that ring,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
it's
It's really nice.
and even the bit where Rogue presents it to him, and again, this goes back to um the strength of the writing, but also the performances when the Doctor's sort of taken aback, but he
Yeah.
takes the ring anyway, and you're not sure, is this part of the charade? Is the Doctor really shocked here? There's sort of wonderful ambiguities that really
Yeah. Well, that scene,
raise it, I think, for me.
I really enjoy that scene because of what the subtext is. Like, because I don't think it is like, because it's not the Rogue isn't really proposing in that scene. Obviously not. They've known each other for um like an hour,
Yeah.
and as another one of Jonathan Groff's characters will have said, you can't fall in love that quickly. That's a Frozen reference, by the way. But that scene is interesting for the characterization of the two characters. For Rogue, it represents coming out of his shell a bit more, opening up to people. For the Doctor, it goes back to the thing we've explored with the character in the past, where it's like the one life that I want but can't have is the domestic life, and I think that that's what's on display here. We've got because the majority of the relationship as is presented to us in this episode is pure flirtation. Like it eventually gets a bit deeper than that.
Yeah.
But for the most part, that's all it is. And the Doctor's clearly having a lot of fun with it. With that scene, the reality hits him of, oh, I mean, I'm having fun, but like, can I actually? Is this something that I could actually pursue? I don't know if it is. And I think that's what hits him so hard about that scene.
Yeah.
Like, he takes the ring because he's playing up the part of the scandal and everything.
Yeah.
But I think in his head, it's even like I've asked Rogue to come with me, but like, can I?
And what does it mean?
Yeah, completely.
And there's also, not that you really see it, but when he turns away and he's sort of got the ring, I wonder if there's almost like a rationalization where he's like, oh, yeah, I'm playing up this moment, but really he's obviously very, very deeply affected by it. Again, it's just a marvelous piece of writing and especially performance.
Yeah, totally. And it's a rare scene of Doctor Who acknowledging the bigotries of the time period and like, the fact that they decide to draw out the shoulder by creating this scandal of two men dancing with each other in 1813. Like, that's really, really clever, and I love that it didn't brush over that, because it very easily could have pulled a Shakespeare code and just gone, don't worry about it. Just dance around like you own the place.
They grounded it in the plot, and I think it makes it stronger for that reason.
Jumping back to the scene on Rogue's ship real quick.
Sure.
We mentioned previous regenerations already. Now feels like a good time to bring up the elephant in the room. We get...
Don't you mean the Shulker in the room?
The Shulker in the room. We get some holograms of the Doctor's past faces. And one of them is Richard E. Grant, who played the Doctor in Scream of the Shulker, which was reviewed on this podcast not 2 months ago. How fortuitous! We didn't see that.
Our good friends over at from Viewer Beware.
We're on Stale Bread, yeah. Holy crap, that lined up really well. That we
did.
Of all canon things for them to review, we chose that. I suppose it also could have worked if we had them review Curse of Fatal Death as well. It's the implications of this are pretty extensive. Obviously, we've seen all the Doctor's canon regenerations. There's nowhere that we've seen that Richard E. Grant can slot in. He's not actually the Ninth Doctor, because we've seen Paul McGann regenerate into John Hurt and John Hurt into Eccleston. So, like, he's not the Ninth Doctor in Scream of the Shulker, but is Scream of the Shulker canon now? When I first discovered this, I thought they were canonizing it by turning Scream of the Shulker into one of the Doctor's adventures while working for the Time Lords in the Timeless Child era, because that's what he's doing in that story. He's working for the Time Lords. This is from a brief skim on other things, but that's what he's doing. For a moment I was like, holy shit, they're really going there. But then I went, no, the Master's in the Scream of the Shulker as well, so it doesn't make any sense for the Master to be active in that period, he probably wouldn't have been born yet.
I mean, it's possible because I think RTD has confirmed this with the sort of extended Hooniverse. He does want to do sort of an alternate dimension sort of a thing.
Yes.
So that's what this could be referring to, especially, yeah, it might be especially because Fujigawa's doctor is a result of the biogeneration. Maybe there's
But yeah.
some weird, you know,
Is the machine able to scan different iterations across
dimensions.
the multiverse? I
Yeah.
think that if we also saw Peter Cushing's Doctor here, I'd believe that. But we don't.
N-
That would be an amazing. If Peter Cushing was in this episode, that would be huge as well. My best bet is that they're just like acknowledging the Shulker Doctor by saying he wore that face as one of his forgotten incarnations during Timeless Child era.
yeah.
That's my interpretation of that at the moment. It's obviously a cool Easter egg, and Richard E. Grant has. This is the third time that Richard E. Grant has been the Doctor in some capacity. We've got Shulker Doctor, Fatal Death Doctor, and now Timeless Child Doctor. He's been the Doctor more times than David Tennant has, which is staggering.
God, that is funny. It must be said. Goodness
Yeah, but
gracious.
it's wild they did it. It's wild that they just did it so casually as well. Like they didn't really draw attention to it. It was like the third or fourth face, and I didn't recognize it the first time around. I was just like, oh, who's that? I can't tell.
Yeah.
The CGI mustn't be great. But then I went along and I was like, wait a minute, all the faces are accounted for.
Yeah.
Who the hell is that?
Yeah. It's funny. That's
it's
that's
really
the least that
sweet.
can be said about it.
Yeah.
It and it's possible that it might just be a fun Easter egg, but
Yeah.
it's hard to tell really. Did the Morbius Doctors was that confirmed to be like a canon event in the Moffat era? I feel like I've heard something
Morbius.
about that.
I have no idea what the Morbius Doctors are, so I would have no idea.
Yeah, I don't think you've seen the story, so you may not
No.
have seen it. In the brain of Morbius, there's a moment when the Doctor and Morbius engage in mind bending, which is, as the Doctor says, kind of like Time Lord wrestling, and you see all the previous incarnations of the Doctor, but they go beyond the first Doctor. There's like 4 other guys that show up, and
Right.
they're never referenced again. It's certainly not in the classic series, but I am fairly certain that I've heard somewhere from somebody that Moffat acknowledged them as a canon
If it
feature.
happened, I have no idea. It's not a thing that instantly jumps to mind thinking back on the Moffat era. If it did, it probably happened in Hellbent, because that's the
Mm,
only Moffat story that happens on Gallifrey.
mm,
But like, and it delves into Time Lord technology as well. And I think
yeah,
it's possible they use similar technology in Hellbent that they do in the Brain of Morbius.
mm,
But like, I have no idea. I don't. If the
mm,
reference was lost on me at the time, if it did,
mm.
and haven't thought about Hellbent in years. I haven't wanted to. So yeah,
You really don't like that story, do you, Cuff?
I despise that story. I hate it. Maybe on a rewatch I'll understand the appeal, because I keep seeing thumbnails of being like it's Moffat's underrated masterpiece. I'm like, no, it's not. It's garbage.
Now, are you just saying that because it came after Heaven Sent, or is it like objectively just terrible?
I think it's objectively terrible. Like it doesn't stand alone on its own at all. Um,
Another story for another day.
It's a look. If I'm upset at Hellbent for ruining any story, it's not for Heaven Sent. It's for ruining Face the Raven. But
Right.
we'll figure that out when we get there.
Yeah.
Um,
We'll get there.
let's talk about the Chalder now.
Yeah.
I think they're definitely the weakest part of the story, and not necessarily because of how they're characterized or anything. Because like, I do kind of like the idea of an alien race showing up on Earth, but not to invade, just to like have fun essentially, and
Yeah.
treating humans as like nothing and just like
As
toys
playthings.
for their
Yeah.
amusement. Yeah, I think it's quite fun.
Yeah.
But then in the third act, the episode all of a sudden wants to make them a world-ending threat, and I don't think it works as well.
Yeah. Um Yeah, I mean the way that they're set up, I could just kind of believe that they have that sort of power. Certainly, like when we're told later on, oh yeah, they can live for 600 years, you get the feeling that they're not that they're like eldritch gods or anything, but
No.
they have quite a lot of power with them. But that to be fair does come in near the end.
Mm.
Um, so I can, yeah, like I say, I can just believe that they nomination thing, even if it is just to have fun. Like they're so kind of almost sociopathically indifferent to the plight of
Yeah.
humanity that they'd be willing to just completely destroy the world and ruin human history just for the fun of it.
Yeah.
You know, go to war with the French,
Yeah.
as they say. But I do understand what you mean in that it feels a bit rushed. Um,
Yes.
it could look, it could have been worse, and I'm sure there are worse examples of similar narrative elements in Doctor Who.
Mm.
I mean, we both enjoyed The Chase, and that story was batshit
Yeah.
insane too. So, but yeah, it's I can understand why it would be an issue, and also it doesn't hurt the story tonally. I think that given the fairly disparate tones the story is going with, it fits together pretty cohesively. But it is a bit odd going from sort of aching tragic romance to and you know a companion almost dying, which gets super serious, to ooh, scary owl people want to take over the world and go to war with the French. You know, it's 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 something else.
Well,
I'll give
on
him that.
the like, I actually like. There are a few moments when the Children are played completely straight for being like dangerous threats.
Yeah.
Um, the first moment I actually really appreciated. It's like the Doctor and Rogue assuming there's only one shoulder, while we have seen two. But then when they are confronting them in the garden, there's like four of them.
Mm.
And I think that was a
And then
really
it's like,
nice reveal.
yeah,
Because like it's obviously playing with dramatic irony to some degree, but it's also like playing dramatic irony with us because we're all like we think we're in on it, but we're really not.
yeah.
And
And
then when they do the same thing with Emily Beckett at the end is
mm,
also a really clever reveal as
yeah, that was
well.
quite shocking. And even like the Doctor realizing, oh, you know, I've gotten more than I bargained for here.
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
to have that happen that late in the narrative is actually quite shocking.
Yeah,
Um, to make us feel that uncertain, and to then have that promise sort of fulfilled when we think that Ruby has been killed. Like
yeah.
that's pretty full on.
Like
So then
I think we all know that like she's not actually dead, but even that moment
no.
is playing it straight is really great.
And
Um,
even in like the context of the season, because we've seen so many wild things happen with Ruby. Yeah, like on a basic level, we kind of know that we knew that she wasn't going to die, but there was still a little bit of tension, and I think more tension there than there would be with other companions. I think
mm.
it's that context is harnessed pretty well in that moment. Um,
Yeah, well, we get to see a flashback scene, presumably which takes place in between Space Babies and the Devil's Cord, of
mm,
the Doctor having a chat with Ruby's mother,
yeah,
which is another thing I really appreciate because it shows the Doctor's like growth as a person. Like looking back
mm,
to World War III, the
mm,
Doctor was like not in any way willing to have a similar conversation with Jackie.
yeah,
He wanted absolutely nothing to do with any of the domestic life of his companions. He would prefer to leave without saying a word. But here
yeah,
we see the Doctor sitting down, like listening to Carla, like acknowledging her concerns and like reassuring her
yeah,
in a really like warm way, which
yeah,
is really great to see. He's clearly learned from the mistakes of the past. He's gone through therapy to become a better person, and it's cool to see. And then completely inversely, we then get to see the Doctor go really dark again, which is always great to see.
yeah. It was awesome. That
Yeah.
was.
What was the line? It was like how long
Oh,
do they
I've got it
live?
written down
600
here.
years.
Fuck, hang on. Yeah, he said, "I'm good, good. It's a long time to suffer," and I'm like,
Yeah. Oh, yes.
that was,
Brilliant.
and it's so great because uh this doctor has been characterized both in writing and performance as a very joie de vivre doctor, right? Someone
Mm.
who loves life, filled to the brim with compassion, um cares so much. We contrast this moment to the bit in Space Babies where he says, no one's ever born wrong, um and it's so chilling to see the doctor become this pitiless. But we know, and this is the best part, we know the doctor's capable
Yep.
of that kind of darkness. Um,
Especially when a companion has
yeah, has
potentially
been,
been killed.
yeah, that, like, we, like, that's his limit. Like,
Yes.
he's been pushed past that in that moment, and there's that genuine fear because
Mm-hmm.
even if Ruby being okay was kind of a foregone conclusion, what the doctor was going to do with the information of Ruby potentially being dead, that wasn't a foregone conclusion. I don't think
Nope.
that could have ended in a number of very dark ways. And I think in a way even better.
Mm.
When he realizes that, oh, it actually is Ruby, and she's stuck on this triangle, and he can't fix it. He realizes,
Yeah.
no, what the fuck have I done? And so he kind of has to wrestle with that kind of ruthlessness. It
Mm.
reminds me a little bit of the end of Resurrection of the Daleks, where the Doctor realizes, oh, I nearly killed somebody today. That's
Mm.
Ugh.
Yeah.
um. There's again, there's just so many layers here.
Yeah.
And
It's really, really clever writing.
in that sense, both of the writing and again, especially that performance,
Mm.
in a way, this might be a bit of a big claim, and I may eat my words later on, but this almost feels like the Doctor that Shudigatwa's Doctor has been this season, if that makes sense. I don't know if
I.
I'd go so far as to say that they're, sort of box ticking. It's like, oh, we've got to have
Mm.
fun Doctor or we've got to have serious Doctor, but there are just a number of tropes, I guess, that we see with the Doctor's characterization, classic tropes that are being fulfilled here, but not in a cliched way. It feels really earnest, and I just find it very interesting to see Trudigatwa's Doctor get to explore those elements. I think.
Well, also in isolation, and something I just realized now, that moment is potentially like it's a mirror of Rogue. Also, like
Mm,
in that moment, he becomes like, right, get the job done, get rid of these fuckers. I, because Rogue also lost someone, and it could be you could make the parallel there, being like, well, is this how the Doctor becomes Rogue? And in the end, it's Rogue that kind of becomes the Doctor by making a sacrificial play and
mm,
listening to the human side of him.
yeah,
So it's a nice little parallel where they kind of switch roles by the end of the episode.
yeah, um, yeah. I think it's just the writing is fantastic, but it's really the fact that it gives the performances such a
Yeah,
space to shine, I think, is the
and it just
really exciting part.
it further highlights, and I don't think we want to stay on this topic too long, but like,
Mm.
can you imagine if the 13th Doctor was written this way?
No.
Well, just for a second, try.
Yeah, no,
Because
I
like,
know what you mean.
how I would have
I'm
loved to
being
see
shitty.
Jodie
But
Whittaker do something like this.
yeah.
Really play dark, and it's just such a shame that she never could.
Yeah, it's tragic. Also, this is a small thing, but I think again it just speaks to Shudigatwa's performance.
Hmm.
The bit where the shoulder are like, oh, you've only got one part of the transportation,
Yeah.
sorry about that, transportation key thing, whatever it is. And I've also written this down. He says, oh, of course, I need the other two pieces. I wonder where they are. Now, the reason why I point that out
Mhm.
is because I think in the hands of most other performances, even the other performers who've played the Doctor, um, that could have been easily just a sarcastic line, right? Like
Yeah.
it's a classic. Oh no,
Oh,
I haven't got the
you're
mechanical
right.
doohickey I need to save the
Drat.
day. Oh, but wait, there's that thing that I've
Mm,
got. We've seen
yeah,
this over and over and over.
totally. Yeah.
Um, but the fact that that Shudigatwa plays it semi-serious,
Yeah.
um, just again, it just adds another layer, and I love that. I think we said that from the beginning he was giving a very confident performance of the Doctor. This is it in all its glory, as far as I'm
Yeah,
concerned.
absolutely. Absolutely. I
Um,
completely agree.
I think whatever flaws you and I may have with the story, performances are not one of them, and certainly not with Ncuti Gatwa's performance. I
No.
don't know. I don't know if I could say it's like objectively his best performance so far, but man, it's up there. It's super strong.
Mm,
The fact that he cares so much about this character and is able to um, draw out all these nuances is really special, I think.
totally. Yeah. Um, we get to our conclusion.
Mm.
Rogue is able to distract the Doctor by kissing him. It's a really it's a built up kiss over the course of the episode.
Yeah,
It's a big like release of all of the flirtation they've been having.
yeah,
Um, and Rogue is able to very very briefly counteract the balance of the transportation grid by adding more weight, and then
mm,
pushing Ruby off by resets the thing to 6, which
yeah,
is a really clever way of doing it.
mm,
Um, and then we get a potential mystery box for the rest of the thing. Um, Rogue is teleported into a barren dimension, one of millions in the multiverse, and the Doctor seemingly has no hope of finding him. Which tragic end, and part of me is like, oh, is this a bury your gaze thing? That's why I want Rogue to come back, because I hope that's
yeah,
not what this
yeah,
is.
yeah. I don't think it would be. I don't
No,
think RTG would be that cheap.
no.
Um, or that kind of insulting. I think he's better than that, frankly.
Yeah, I hope he's
Um,
better than that.
but I can understand, yeah, why that might be. I can understand that sort of interpretation.
Mm.
But yeah, hopefully we'll see Rogue again because, like, even beyond that, as you say, you get the feeling there's a lot more to this character that we want to see and explore. So I definitely hope he shows up again.
And
There
even
was
if
something.
it like, also just real quick, even if it is like, I would have more of a problem with it if it was the only time the Doctor pursued a romantic relationship with someone and it ended badly. But like,
Hmm,
it's never worked out well for him.
no, no,
So it's just playing into that aspect of the character. So that's how I can
yeah,
work around it if it does end
yeah,
up
yeah,
being the final end of Rogue that we ever see. But
hmm,
I still hope he shows up again.
yeah, for sure. That was something I was slightly confused about, and maybe I just wasn't paying attention or missed something. So it was confirmed that when like that Rogue was transported to another dimension. Like I'm just trying to remember when that was confirmed, whether it was when he was
It was.
explaining,
It
"Oh,
was
yeah, this thing goes to another dimension, and we don't know
well.
where," or
So it was initially set to a furnace somewhere, but when the Doctor reworks it to make it non-lethal, he mentions it's going to send them to a barren parallel dimension.
okay, yeah, no, that's starting to come to mind now. Okay, yeah, sure. Um, right, how interesting. Um, that's kind of dark in and of itself when you think about it. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
Still,
Mm,
that does make sense. Okay, yeah, so that tragedy, like, it still works, I think, in the
yes.
plot, certainly.
Yeah, totally.
Um, I want to talk about a couple of the smaller issues I had with
Sure.
this story, and if if this is meant to be a reflection of Bridgerton tropes, that would make sense, but it still doesn't work for me. So there are a couple of moments. There's a bit early on where um like the Duchess makes the that outfit so last season comment, and I'm surprised how little it bothered me, but I just think, God, I just expected a bit better than that. That just seems so. It's kind
Well,
of
you got to
dumb.
remember that this is an alien mimicking the kind of dialogue they would expect to hear in this era.
Yeah, I
It's
get.
not actually a human saying, "Oh my
Yeah,
god,
that's
that
true.
outfit
Because
is from last year."
she'd been cloned at that point,
Yes,
hadn't she? Yeah,
yes,
okay, that makes a little bit more sense. I think maybe it's just a visceral shock of the line, because I'll tell you what it reminds
sure.
me of. There was a show, from what I saw of it, a really bad sketch comedy show, I think.
Oh,
No, not a sketch comedy show, like a sitcom where it's the guy from Peep Show starring as Shakespeare, and I sat down with my family for some reason because it was
oh,
just
hang
on
on.
TV.
Wait, hang on. Sorry, no, you can't be calling Upstart Crow bad.
Is that what I'm thinking of?
It's David Mitchell as Shakespeare, and he's from Peep Show. So,
Yeah, I hated it.
oh no, I
I
own the
watched
DVD. I love it.
I watched I watched 2 minutes, and I thought the comedy was so painful. I left the room. I'm like, I can't. When he's like, what the fuck was it? It's like, um, who debarred? I'm debarred, or oh, that was so last. I'm gonna lose it. I can't. Anyway, sorry. That's a whole tangent. That's a whole other thing which I'm not going to discuss.
Sure.
Point is, the whole, that outfit was so last season reminded me of that, and I'm like, not great. That being said, the fact that it's part of the shoulders characterization, I guess that kind of works.
Yeah.
So there was that. Why the fuck am I blanking on this? Oh yes. The fact that the shoulder call it cosplay. Now that
Yeah.
bothered me a
Yeah.
little bit.
No, it bothered
Um,
me as well.
yeah, because like when the doctor says it, that's fine, because I assumed he was just using I guess a human approximation of whatever it is the shoulder are doing. And like, let's
Yes.
be honest, effectively it is cosplay. But to have
Yeah,
them use
it's
that kind of vernacular, it just doesn't strike me as terribly authentic.
no, I
Um,
agree.
it's the sort of thing,
And
and I know it's a bit of a
we didn't
nitpick, but I'd want a stronger sense of world building, even in a piece of dialogue as small as that.
yeah, we didn't need them to say it.
Yeah,
We already got the gist by that point. The most generous approximation I can make is that in that moment the Cholder used their own word for it, but the TARDIS
the
translation
TARDIS
matrix,
translated.
yeah, it
Yeah,
translated it
but
back to cosplay
that
for us.
doesn't track, because there are other examples where the TARDIS uses vernacular of whatever planet they're on, whether it's the Daleks. I don't know what the equivalent measure of time is, but they count time in rels on Skaro.
It was seconds for them. Yeah, I suppose so. I guess what you could argue is like perhaps a rel isn't precisely a second and is its own
Well,
unit of measurement, which is why the
well,
TARDIS
actually,
doesn't translate it.
no. That reminds me though. They use human language to describe this cosplay thing, but they use the word vexel to describe a measure of time, even in this
Yeah.
story. So it just didn't
Yes.
fit together. Um,
Well,
for me, I
a
think.
vexel is also like that's another thing. Where they count vexels, and it's not a second or a minute. It's a vexel is a vexel, but what they're doing is cosplay.
Yeah, yeah. I guess that makes sense.
Again,
Still,
that's still a very generous
mm,
interpretation of the line. I don't like that they say cosplay either.
yeah,
I'm just trying to make it make sense.
yeah. It just it doesn't really hurt the story. I just think I just want a bit more, just a little bit more thought put into lines like that.
Sure.
It would just sell the whole thing more. Especially given that the Trollder themselves, they are frightening. But they
Mm.
do, I think, um, sort of straddle the line between frightening and silly, which is
Yeah.
a common fixture of Doctor Who. I'm not that that's not I don't have an issue with that at all.
No.
But getting that balance right can be really important. And if you've got a bunch of characters that are frightening in some moments, but are also very goofy and kind of over the top in others, when you have them using that kind of vernacular, it just doesn't help, I don't think. And I
No,
realize
I agree.
again, these things are nitpicks in an otherwise pretty solid story.
Yeah,
But they just speak to, I think, a slightly deeper issue of world building that I just want a bit more care with, I think.
yeah, I
That's why
agree.
they do bother me.
The final thing I think was worth mentioning as we head into the outro is we have another Susan Twist appearance, not in person, but we have the portrait of,
Mm,
I think it's the Duchess's mother or
mm,
grandmother. I forget what the relation is, but it's another instance of Susan Twist being related to one of our characters,
mm,
which I am just so curious as to how this is gonna play out. It's looking like we're going to figure out in next week's episode, or at least
mm,
start a part of the mystery is going to become unraveled.
mm,
Um, the Duke's mother. It was the Duke's mother,
mm,
mother of the Duke. That's it.
yeah.
But speaking of the Duchess as well, I did see that one of the rumors about this episode was that the Duchess was going to be revealed as the Rani, and I heard that and I was like, why can't the fan base be more intelligent?
Right.
They're not going to make a character the Rani and have it be just like a one-off thing in this episode. If they're going to reintroduce the Ronnie, they're going to put their time into it and actually like
Yeah.
it, just dumb.
Would you say that Susan Twist has a bigger chance of actually being the Rani?
Yes,
Um,
I do because they've put the work in.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I figured. Um, yeah.
But yeah, that
We'll.
brings us. So you can finish.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, yeah, I think we're at the end here, but
Yeah,
yeah, like I generally did enjoy this episode. Um, and given, yeah, it's not perfect, it's flawed. But I enjoy the risks that they're taking, and there's a lot of power in it, I guess.
hmm
Um, and also just another shout out to I really actually did enjoy the romance between the Doctor and Rogue. It felt really
yes,
really authentic, I thought. Um, like yeah, I there was a real power to it,
yeah,
right?
I agree.
Because given how sort of fun and flirty it is at the beginning, it's surprising and really impressive how serious it gets. You really feel that romantic aching and I think the longing, I guess, at the end there. And the moment when
Yeah,
the Doctor puts on the ring, it's great, it's subtle, it's showing without telling. Gonna be completely honest, we haven't gone through the Moffat era yet, but I think that moment was more subtle than most of the romantic subplots in Moffat's era, so that's a whole other thing.
no,
Um,
it absolutely is, and like I said, I mentioned it earlier as well. It's a romance that is sprung up from their bond and their kinship and the similarities they can see in each other.
yeah,
Like it's also like built on intrigue regarding the differences between the two, a bit of uh, physical attraction never hurt
yeah, for
anyone.
sure.
It's all the ingredients are there, and it. I think ending on this like, I think you said yearning,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it does kind of
the
like
aching and the longing. Yeah,
yeah, and like almost the tragedy of like what could this have been. I think that's also really powerful, and
yeah,
again I hope we see Rogue again in the future.
yeah,
I hope it's not. I hope we don't get him back in a cheap way,
yeah,
but I do hope this is revisited again.
yeah. And I think just the ring is just a nice
Yeah,
memento. It's one of those things that just feels right.
yeah,
And
totally.
I know we've sort of come back to this before, but like the level of confidence we're seeing with the performances certainly, but also with the writing of this Doctor throughout this season and in this episode specifically is really admirable. It's got really good sort of dramatically punchy results, which is really exciting to see.
Yeah,
And it goes to sort of what I said with the story generally. Yeah, not all the risks are paying off, but man, it's good to see Doctor Who taking like really interesting and good risks again, and
yeah.
risks that aren't, terribly considered and ones that wreck the canon. So yeah, it's
It's great to say that. It's great to say that with a potentially canon-breaking Richard E. Grant cameo in the same episode.
I'd still buy it. I don't
Yeah,
even I'm
me
not
too.
gonna try and justify that, but yeah, I'd still buy it. So
I mean, the canon's already broke. You might as well play into it.
Yeah, I guess so. But yeah, generally, really good story. I thought, flaws here and there. The romance between the Doctor and Rogue really anchors the whole thing. And given how many other things the story's juggling, because there is quite a lot of other stuff, um,
Yeah.
it may not all be cohesively gelling together as much as I might want, but it's still doing those things really, really well. Also, small thing, I actually did like the line when Ruby said, "Oh, I cosplayed," when she
Mhm.
tells the Doctor how she got out of that. Like it's a nice sort of full circle moment, and it feels right, especially for Ruby as a character.
Yeah.
Um, and given that it's one of those, oh, here's that hip with the young folks reference, it works pretty well. Good, at the very least, that line could have been much worse. So
Yeah, well, it's a clever thing of like I was cosplaying as a cosplayer.
yeah,
It's the extra layer on it. I think is nice and really
for
sells
sure.
it.
Um, but yeah, I think yeah, solid, imperfect but very solid story is what I'd say this is.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a 7.
Same. I
Cool.
think let me put it this way: there are some elements of it where it's like an 8, but those are the elements in isolation, if that makes sense. Like, and when you
Yeah.
put it all together, I think yeah, a 7 is pretty fair.
Mhm.
But man, it's a good 7, and given that that has to be the lowest either of us have given have
It's
rated a story this season, isn't it?
tied with Space Babies, which is on average ahead of Rogue because Sam Sweeting threw the curve off.
Right. Right. Okay.
I'm
Okay.
shaking my fist at you, Sweeting. No.
um.
So this episode didn't affect any of our predictions. We're still sitting at the same score we have been. But next
Yeah. That
time,
that reminded me though. I thought I'm probably getting this wrong. I'm maybe misremembering it. I thought I
mhm,
did mention something about like a montage of Doctor's faces showing up, but I think that was more in reference to the first Doctor showing up, and I think I specifically said no, like he actually has to show up. It's not just
yeah, and you also said David Bradley.
yes, I specifically said David Bradley. So anyway,
Yeah, nice,
oh
nice
well.
try. You're not getting 500,000 points for the hologram Doctor faces.
Damn it. Well, are we what are we sitting at the moment?
It's
Is
still
it
750 to 550 in your favor.
right?
Um, I have a feeling that next time, well, it's the start of the 2-part finale next time. So we're getting Lenny Rush. I don't, based on what we've seen, I don't think he's going to be a Doctor from Division anymore. I think he's most likely just a unit higher up.
Hmm.
Who knows though? I might get near a milli by the end of this.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, next time we're going to be reviewing The Legend of Ruby Sunday. I am so excited.
Yeah, I'm pretty keen. I've seen not just the next time thing at the end of the episode, but I've seen a bunch of the other trailers for it. It looks pretty exciting. We've got uh Rose Noble's back,
Yep.
uh
Mel.
Kate Stewart's back, Mel's back, and we've got Lenny Rush, which I'm very excited about.
Yep. And we're really putting the Susan Twist mystery front and center. I really hope this is a good resolution
Yep. I
because it's been a really solid season and I hope it doesn't whimper out.
yeah. Uh, but I trust RTD's ability to, make it all come together, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm excited at the very least.
Until then, I'm Alex.
I'm Fitz.
And scandalous.